like these. So we simply need to cut the string so you can't fear toward one of the strongest monarchs. Rakan tells him not to worry, as he is exhausted. Grabbing Baru by his neck, he says, the fact that he's relying on these small fries implies that he is still incomplete. An incomplete monarch can't get in the way of true monarchs. As he was starting to crush Baru, JINWOO noticed that Baru's existence was fading and wondered if this was how he managed to get rid of the shadow placed on him by Thomas Andre. Panicking, JINWOO tries to cancel the summon, ordering Baru to come back, but is horrified to see a notification telling him, "You cannot retract the specified subject." He jumps into attack Rakan himself, saving Baru in the process. As he was putting Baru back, he thought, I managed to avoid Baru from being extinguished. However, he looks at Silid, who was saying, "King of Beasts, you are right." Silid covers an enormous amount of area in ice, fully transforms, and tells JINWOO, "You are confident in your powers in controlling puppets like these. So we simply need to cut the strings so you can't control them anymore. I will trap the puppets under my authority and make them go through healing and resurrection over and over again. Then your soldiers will be nothing but parasites that eat away at your mana." He attacks JINWOO, saying, "What will you do now?" Silid manages to injure JINWOO's arm and, using his strength, lifts him into the air and slams him to the ground, thinking he's not there yet. But JINWOO leaps out from the rubble and attacks him. Silid dodges and strikes back with such force that JINWOO gets launched back. He manages to land on his feet, thinking he's fast. Looking at his condition, Silid says, "Your stealth skill must have a heavy mana consumption," and leaps toward JINWOO, saying, "I will put an end to this quickly." They start exchanging blows, and as they fight, JINWOO thinks, "I can see all his movements, but if only I could be faster than him, just a little bit." Looking at him, Silid tells him, "I don't know what you are plotting, but it's no use," and attacks using his ice magic. But by that time, JINWOO was already behind him, saying, "I got him." He sees Silid smirking and senses something. Everyone else was also horrified to see that Rakan, from the back, managed to sneak up on JINWOO, piercing through his chest. He tells JINWOO, "I guess you're nothing without the speed you're so confident in." JINWOO looks down at his claws as his weapons fall to the ground. He thinks, "My level increased, so this much is nothing." Silid picks up his dagger, stabbing JINWOO, saying, "I will return your weapon to you," and asks, "Can you heal like you did earlier?" JINWOO tells him, "Probably not. No matter how strong you are, you're not a complete monarch." He asks him, "Is this as far as you can go, human? If that is the case, you will not be able to witness the moment our armies set foot in this world. When that happens, there will be a mountain of human corpses, and their blood will form endless rivers. But this country, which you grew up in, will be different. I shall personally freeze every single human in this country myself and make them suffer through an eternal agony. They will have to live through an eternity, not being able to die nor live. So show me your endless contempt for me within your death. That will also be part of my joy." As JINWOO was being frozen, he thought, "I need to hold on for just a little more." A notification opened up, telling him that his HP had reached 0 and the player had died. But another notification showed up, telling him that the player was in possession of the Black Heart and had met all the requirements for a passive skill, which had been activated. The screen filled up with a bright light. After that, JINWOO woke up. He sat up, panicking, thinking about his fight with the monarchs. He wondered if all of that had been a dream and thought that he was certain the ice dagger had pierced through his heart. He wondered how he was still alive, that as he was thinking, Woo, along with another man, entered the room, asking JINWOO if he had come back to his senses. Seeing him, JINWOO was surprised and asked, "What happened to those monarchs?" Calling him the chairman, and asked, "How are you still alive?" Hearing that, Woo was surprised and told JINWOO there were 3 things he should tell him. Firstly, I am not the chairman, but the chief inspector of the surveillance team. Secondly, I would like to ask you about the moving statues. And third, How do you know who I am? JINWOO wasn't able to process what he was talking about. Wu tells him that when they arrived at the site with the White Tigers Guild, it was already over. JINWOO tells him, "That's not what I was talking about." Seeing this situation, JINWOO realizes that he has somehow traveled back in time. Looking at his condition, Wu asks if he's alright. JINWOO tells him he needs time to rearrange his thoughts as he walks out of the hospital, that he looks at his stats and items in his inventory, thinking everything is the same as before. Even at Kamish Wrath, as he was thinking, he heard a voice asking why he was not resting. It was Jaina, who asked him if he hurt his head too in the dungeon. Looking at his appearance, she wondered if she came into the wrong room and asked him, "Who are you?" JINWOO thought, "I guess she can't recognize me because I gradually changed into my current looks back then." He asked her, "Can you really not recognize your older brother?" She asks him, "Are you sure you're my older brother? I feel like you've become different, and you've grown quite a bit as well." JINWOO, ignoring the question, tells her, "It's probably your feeling." He starts to walk away, saying, "I'm a little busy. I need to head to the Hunters Association." She asks him the reason for doing that, and JINWOO tells her he needs to inform them that he's giving up being a hunter, that he asked her to return to school, saying, "I know you came over while in the middle of class." Turning toward Han Song-yi, he tells her, "Don't ever think about giving up on studying to become a hunter." She was surprised, wondering how he knew her name. He puts on his hood, thinking, "I don't have my shadow soldiers, so I just need to rebuild my army," and wonders, how could this be happening? He arrives at the association building to have his rank reevaluated, and the men talk about how he's the first S rank in 2 years. They tell him their device can't measure his magic power. JINWOO tells them, "Before we do it again, I would like to meet the chairman." The men tell him they will guide him to his room, and he starts to walk away, saying, "I already know where it is." Seeing him go, they wonder how an outsider like him knows where the chairman's room is. Going up the elevator, he sees another man standing with him, thinking, "What kind of scenario should I make up today? It's not my first time making up lies to the association, and if I get caught by Chief Inspector Wu, I'd be in big trouble." He hears JINWOO saying, "You possess a stealth skill, and yet you haven't reported about the fact." Hearing that, the man starts to reach for his weapon, saying, "How do you know that?" JINWOO tells him, "Someone will ask you to avenge their daughter for them." He says, "I'm not interested in what you do with criminals, but if you hurt innocent hunters during that incident, you will die by my hands." Seeing his weapons in his hands, the man is stunned, and JINWOO tells him, "You only get one warning." As JINWOO entered the chairman's office, his eyes widened, and he said, "It's been forever since I last saw him." He saw Chairman Go-Gun, he's sitting in front of him. Seeing him, the chairman says, "Seeing how you came to look for me as soon as you got back your test results, I assume you were somewhat familiar with the procedures." Seeing JINWOO emotional, he asks him, "Are you alright?" JINWOO tells him, "It's nothing." As they sit down, the chairman tells JINWOO, "I will get straight to the point," and JINWOO stops him, saying, "There is a deal I would like to tell you about." He asks the chairman to change the regulations so that even summoned creatures can be counted as raid members by the association, proposing that if the chairman does that, he would go to Jeju Island and rid it of the ant monsters. The chairman, shocked after hearing that, tells JINWOO not to say something so ridiculous, reminding him how many times they have failed on the Jeju Island raid already. But as he looks at JINWOO, he senses an overwhelming amount of mana. JINWOO tells him, "It's something only I can accomplish," and assures him that he will take care of the ants on the island. The chairman was left speechless, thinking JINWOO possessed a power that far exceeded that of a national-level hunter. After that, JINWOO goes through all the adventures again, from saving Lee Ju-hee to his first Red Gate incident. He defeats the High Orcs, turns Tusk into a shadow soldier, saves his mother from eternal slumber, and finally makes his way to Jeju Island, where he turns Baru into a shadow soldier, along with all the insect monsters that were inhabiting the island. And that is where he realizes something and asks, "Why don't you stop this?" He shouts, "I know all of this is an illusion, so stop this charade and reveal yourself. How much longer are you planning to look down on me from above?" As he stands there, looking above, the illusion stops, and he gets surrounded by notifications asking if he wants to restart the world. Seeing this, JINWOO asks for the identity of the entity, and as the one responsible appears, JINWOO recognizes him as the king of the dead. That he asks JINWOO, if you wanted, you could live in this world for eternity. It would be like never waking up from the most wonderful dream. Hearing that, JINWOO asks, are you telling me to be trapped within this illusion you've created? The king replies, no, I did not create this world. You are responsible for its creation. He explains, it's a world created by combining your desire to correct your mistakes up until now, together with my power. In other words, this is my territory. This is the eternal rest. This is death. He tells JINWOO, I have been watching you for far longer than you could possibly imagine. You, who have always been closer than anyone to death, yet so desperately resisting against it. I am the record of your struggles, the evidence of your resistance, and the reward of your suffering. I am death. I am eternal rest, as well as terror. I am you, and within my territory, you're able to do anything you want. You are able to turn my servants into yours and absorb my power from them. Although it is only possible within your own territory, the power to create, destroy, and change the world. Hearing all that, JINWOO asks, are you saying that you and I possess the same power? The king tells JINWOO, I've been waiting for the day we finally meet for a very long time now. He says, I am the Shadow Monarch and the administrator of the deepest part of the darkness. JINWOO asks, why was I chosen? The monarch replies, I shall show you our beginning and end, and also your beginning. And the story shifts back to the city where JINWOO was fighting the monarchs. Looking at him, Rakan tells Sillid, he's dead for sure. Leonard also tells Thomas the same thing, that JINWOO's presence disappeared just now. Hearing that, Beck says, that's impossible. So now, there isn't anyone who can stop those magical beasts. Lim, from the top of the building, thinks, I shouldn't have listened to that person earlier. He wonders if they can stop the creatures by bombarding them right now and decides to attack, instructing his hunters to prepare to fire. We will fire at once with my signal. Our target is that magical beast who looks like a White Walker. As he was preparing to attack, JINWOO started to emit massive amounts of mana, shocking Sillid. He saw his black heart burning with dark flame. Seeing this, both Sillid and Rakan realize something and charge toward JINWOO, saying, we must stop the true king from descending after the fake king has died. As they both get close, Rakan gets kicked in the face by someone and hits Sillid. They both go flying into a nearby building. The man stands in front of JINWOO, who is still inside the prison that Sillid made, and he tells both of them, none shall touch this child. And we see the history of the Shadow Monarch that in the distant past, an absolute split the light and dark to create his emissaries. From the light and from the dark, he created the 8 sovereigns. Emissaries were born to maintain the world, and the sovereigns were born to destroy the world. Both factions continuously killed each other, but fatigued by the constant and unending war, the brightest fragment of brilliant light asked the Absolute why he was ignoring the screams of the countless soldiers dying for him, and asked for him to lend them his strength so they could fight in his honor. But the Absolute being did not reply back to the fragment, and at that moment, the fragment of brilliant light realized that to the Absolute, the battle between themselves and the sovereigns was nothing more than a form of entertainment, and he did not want the war to end. They learned that even if they abided by the law of the Absolute, only death awaited them. As long as the Absolute existed, the war would never end. And to end this meaningless war, they unsheathed their blades. It was the start of the rebellion. The monarch points, saying, that is me from the distant past. He tells JINWOO, I was the sole emissary who stood up against the rebellion of the other emissaries, but my pitiful number of soldiers powerlessly fell before the united armies of the emissaries. And when I thought it was the end, I reopened my eyes within the darkness and realized that the Absolute had hidden a certain power inside me. And on that day, the Shadow Monarch was born. Using his powers, he resurrected the defeated armies and led them to the battlefront. However, when he returned, everything was already over. The remaining fragments of brilliant light had killed the Absolute Being and called themselves the new rulers. Using various tools containing the power of the Absolute Being, they hunted down the sovereigns. As a result, the King of Giants, Legia, was captured by the rulers, and the power balance between the two sides collapsed. That he tells JINWOO that the sovereigns realized the severity of the situation, and I used that moment to reach out to them. They had no choice but to combine forces with me in order to combat our common enemy, the rulers. From then on, I continued the long-lasting battle as neither a fragment of brilliant light nor an emissary of the Absolute, but as the Shadow Monarch, that I strengthened my army by gathering soldiers that remained on the battlefield. And when I combined forces with the army of destruction led by the King of Berserk Dragons, the monarchs as well as the rulers came to fear me. Two of the monarchs, who feared me, aimed for my back after combining forces, and due to that, my shadow army was nearly annihilated. And the strength that was too powerful brought me betrayal. While the King of the Beasts, the Beast Monarch, ran away after abandoning his soldiers, the King of the Demons, the Monarch of White Flames, Baron, had to pay the ultimate price. But then, the rulers started to descend from the sky. They surrounded the Shadow Monarch, kneeled in front of him, and asked for his forgiveness, saying, "There is no reason for us to fight any longer." Even though they possessed enough power to send me back to nothingness if they wanted to, they chose to pursue peace. It was the least respect they could have shown me for the time I was their ally, fighting on the front lines while leading the army of brilliant light. Hearing their apology, the Shadow Monarch asks them, "Have you not harmed my liege with your swords and spears?" And they tell him, he was also their master. Hearing that, the Shadow Monarch gets furious and tells them, "This is precisely why your crimes are even more heinous." The fragment tells him, "You should understand better than anyone how we felt when we raised our banners of rebellion against our master. We simply wanted to end this war." Hearing this, the Shadow Monarch tells them, "Pierce my heart with your spear. This is the end that you so desperately seek. You shall finally become the victors of this war." But the fragments asked him once more to find it in his heart to forgive them as all of the armies surround him, showing him their respect. The Shadow Monarch tells JINWOO that he was overwhelmed and was unable to come up with any kind of solution, so I decided to hide for the sake of revenge. Since I had trapped the Monarch of White Flames within me, I was planning on striking the forces of the Beast Monarch after letting my body recover. But while I was hiding, the monarchs who lost the majority of their power had been defeated by the rulers. And when I reappeared in front of the monarchs who took their chances to escape to the cracks between the dimensions, the King of Dragons did not permit any kind of fight, knowing that it was time for them to recover their strength. And as such, he gladly allowed me to join his forces that we went searching for a new world for the sake of building up our new army. Hearing all of that, JINWOO asks, "Is it Earth you're talking about?" The Shadow Monarch tells him, "Yes, that is correct," and shows JINWOO the destroyed cities. He thinks, "I've seen this scene before. This is the Demon Castle," and asks, "Is this what will happen in the future?" And the Monarch tells him, "This is a recording of the past." Hearing that, JINWOO asks, what was he talking about? He explains that in the past, the rulers were late to detect the movements of the sovereigns, and by the time they arrived, everything had come to an end. By then, the rulers grew angry that the army of the Chaos World, which they failed to eradicate, managed to bring destruction upon another world. So in order to correct this, they used their tool containing the power of the Absolute, which they had prohibited themselves from using, the tool called the Cup of Reincarnation. It had the ability to turn back time by 10 years. The rulers used everything they had in order to save this world, but the current Earth was way too weak to fight against the monarchs. Whether the monarchs or the rulers won the battle, the impact brought upon this planet would remain the same. So the rulers made a drastic decision. If they couldn't save everyone, They wanted to make sure that at least some would survive, so those people could continue on in this world. JINWOO asks, is that why the hunters were created? He explains that they were making human beings capable of surviving the collision between the two forces. The rulers wanted the humans to survive no matter what they had to do. JINWOO thinks the Demon King is a fragment of memories left behind by the Shadow Monarch and asks, has this world already gone through countless annihilations? He replies, indeed. Although the higher beings are not able to go against the flow of time, they're able to perceive the change in the flow of time created by the cup of reincarnation. He tells JINWOO, now the cup was unusable. JINWOO, surprised, asks, how was that possible? He tells JINWOO that the cup did not possess infinite power. Just like the Absolute, who was eliminated by his own creations, there is a limit to every power. JINWOO asks, how are the creations able to kill the Absolute? He explains, it's no different from humans dying from machines they had created. We were created to fight, and our powers were more than enough to bring down our own creator. He goes on to say that the sovereigns utilized the rulers' methods to create a plan of their own, similar to how the rulers lent power to humans so they could kill magical beasts, strengthening the world. The sovereigns would also borrow a human body to descend onto the world and bring their armies far earlier than the expectations of the rulers. They planned to use the magical energy that was spread around the planet by the rulers to turn the entirety of Earth into one large trap. In order for them to cross over into this world, they needed a host body who was able to handle their power. But because I and the Monarch of Destruction possess powers too great, we could not find humans who were suitable to be our hosts. At that time, one of the most capable mages working under a king came to me with a proposal. They were willing to find me a suitable human. That mage, called the Architect, asserted that they would give me assistance, but only for an imperishable body in return. But unfortunately, no living thing could become a vessel to contain death. The Architect used the system that he designed to search for one talented in sensing magic power, one with prodigal physical power, one with superiority, one with great mentality. He searched for a human whose strength would meet my power, and so he found someone who bested his system, someone who rewrote the rules of his game and exceeded his expectations. It was you, who was always weak, always closest to death, and yet evaded death again and again. I watched you, and even in opposition to the Architect, I picked you. So I shall say it once more. I am the record of your struggles, the evidence of your resistance, and the reward of your pain. Hearing all that, JINWOO asks him, even though I had exceeded the Architect's expectations, I must not have been enough to be able to handle your power? He explains, the Architect used objects of human skill and human preferences to adjust to my strength. He used games and recreations to fuel your amusement. The Architect system, which used my power, transformed your body level by level to match mine. JINWOO asks, why did you betray the Architect?
The monarchs tell him, it was because that place did not offer a place for me. Hearing that, JINWOO tells him, my answer is the same. This is not a place where I should be. Hearing his answer, the monarch gets happy as he walks away. JINWOO asks, is this the last time I will be seeing you? He tells JINWOO, I will return to rest, but you, the Shadow Monarch, will live an imperishable life. Thus, the crossing of our paths is quite unlikely. With death, your power has become absolute. The way to go back is, before he could finish, JINWOO tells him, I know. The Shadow Monarch tells him, because I am you.
Scene shift and Scyllid and Rakan witnessing the rebirth of JINWOO, they ask the man calling him a fragment of brilliant light that the worst disaster is coming from the body of the human you are trying to protect. Are you really trying to bring disaster upon this world by your own hands? Are you really risking your life to aid the Shadow Monarch's revival? Just what are you traitors thinking? Rakan tells Scyllid that we don't have much time, and he prepares to stop JINWOO from gaining his full power. And seeing this, the man also prepares to fight to buy time for JINWOO to recover. And with lightning-fast speed, all of them charge toward each other as the fight begins. Scyllid closes in and attacks the fragment using his trident, but he was too fast and managed to dodge the strike and from the above he sees Rockin's claw coming straight towards him. And before his attack connects the fragment, using his speed, got out of the way and got behind Scyllid, stabbing him in the shoulder. Seeing this, Scyllid thinks he's reading the trajectory of my spear and moving accordingly. As they were unable to land a single hit on the fragment, Rockin thinks he has the movement of a warrior who has experienced countless battles. He's barely avoiding the Frost Monarch's attacks and fending off all of my attacks at the same time. As he was distracted by Rockin, Scyllid sneaks up behind him, preparing to freeze him in place. But the fragment is too fast, and he kicks him under his chin, launching him in the air and smashing into a building. As he is doing that, Rockin also closes in and opens up his mouth, about to bite into shreds, and gets pierced through his face instead and screams out in pain. And before he could recover, the fragment delivers an elbow to his ribs, and he gets thrown back a couple of feet. Furious, he rips out the dagger from his face, saying, "I will tear you apart," but falls to the ground shaking. He turns back to look at JINWOO and senses the overwhelming mana that is being emitted by him. Terrified, he jumps back, creating distance between himself and JINWOO. And by that time, Scyllid had also recovered, and as he tells the fragment that won't work on me again, he turns towards Rockin, instructing him to attack again. But Rockin tells him, "I will stop now." Scyllid is shocked after hearing that and asks if he was going to stop after coming this far, asking if he was out of his mind. Rockin tells him, "Can't you feel it? The mana surrounding us has started to cry." He says the Shadow Monarch is coming. He opens up a portal, saying, "Count me out of this." Scyllid asks him, "Didn't you promise to help me defeat the Shadow Monarch?" Rockin replies, "My promise was limited to only when the Shadow Monarch was in his human form. But since the real Monarch is coming, I no longer have a promise to keep." Scyllid tries to stop him, saying, "You're running away with your tail between your legs. Even though you're the Beast Monarch," he replies, "you won't understand me because you have yet to experience the full power of the Shadow Monarch." And he teleports away, saying, "I shall pray for your fortune." After he leaves, Scyllid decides to stay and fight, and tells the fragment, "Taste the terror of the frost. This is my true power." He buries his trident into the ground, and the area starts to get covered in an ice storm. Seeing this, Lim instructs his hunters, "We are retreating, leave this place at once." And the ice starts to convert into spears, and all of them rain down on the fragment. That gave Scyllid enough time to prepare for a powerful attack, and he screams, "Mere humans dare challenge me," without knowing their place. As a gigantic piece of ice manifests in the sky, he tells the fragment, "Be trapped inside the eternal void with the Shadow Monarch." Seeing the size of the ice, he thinks, is he planning to destroy this entire area, and gets hit by one of the incoming projectiles as he was distracted, losing his arm. In the process, he looked in horror as the ice started to fall towards him, and before it could crash down on them, a shadow leaps towards it, crashing in the ice. And as the ice shatters, we see it's Baru and on the ground. The Shadow Monarch had appeared in his true form, shielding the fragment. He told Scyllid, "Do not assume the position of the king with such measly power." While Scyllid was standing there stunned, thinking, "He broke out of my spell," which means the commander-rank shadow soldiers have regained their powers. Seeing him like this, Jai was started to come out of the armor, revealing his true body, saying, "That's why I shouldn't trust prophecies." All of his soldiers were free, and they kneeled in front of him. And he asked, "Did the beast flee?" And Scyllid's expression started to change, hearing him say, "Who dares to leave without my permission?" Horrified, he thinks it's a wall, which I couldn't even imagine. Overcoming the difference in power between me and him is just too significant. And as he was thinking, a dark bubble started to form around JINWOO, which gradually covered most of the area in the city. It kept growing and was able to be seen from the space, and it covered half of the earth. And as the bubble disappears, JINWOO says, "Found you." Thinking he was distracted, Scyllid had a feeling he saw an opening that will never come again. He gathered all of his mana for one final attack, thinking, although there exists a power gap between us, for him to let his guard down with his enemy right in front of him. He thinks, "If I miss this opportunity, the only thing waiting for me is an inevitable death. So I must end everything with this single strike," and throws the trident towards JINWOO, but JINWOO effortlessly stopped it with his hand, and the weapon shattered into pieces. And seeing this, Scyllid thought, how is this possible? So this is the power of the Shadow Monarch, the power of one of the strongest monarchs, and the fragment of brilliant light. But instead of striking back, JINWOO tells him to wait, as he will save him for later, saying, "Wait patiently." Until I finished taking care of the beast somewhere in a forest, a portal appeared, and from it Rockin was emerging, thinking the aura of death is starting to close in on me. I regret needlessly arguing with the Frost Monarch, since it caused me to run away a bit too late. But now that things have come to this, I need to quickly hide here until the King of Dragons come back. As he was thinking, a shadow appeared behind him, and sensing it, he turned around. Thinking this aura, don't tell me he froze in fear as he sensed JINWOO behind him, thinking the air is soaking with the smell of death. He gets to his knees, thinking the overwhelming power gap, where I can't win nor run away, the fear of strength I feel from my experiences. He tells himself to lower his head and obey him. He tells JINWOO, I, the King of Beasts, do not wish to fight against you. Please forgive me for my sinful acts and accept me as one of your allies, as in the near future the King of Dragons will set foot on this land with his soldiers, and I, along with my beast army, shall assist you. Hearing all that, JINWOO agrees to spare his life, and Rockin, smirking, thinks he fell for it. How foolish. He isn't the real deal. If he was the real deal, there'd be no way he would forgive me, especially after I betrayed him once again and tried to get rid of his vessel. I bought time thanks to the humans' foolish forgiveness and affection. I just need to hold out until the King of Dragons gets here. And when that time comes, I will rip apart your corpse into pieces. But tells JINWOO, I shall serve you with loyalty. Seeing him like this, JINWOO tells him before that we need to take care of something. I have 5 scars from your claws that pierced my heart. If you can survive 5 attacks from me, I will forgive you. Hearing that, Rockin gets furious and fully transforming. Says, you dare mock me, the King of Beasts, and tells JINWOO, although my life will end here, you will not leave unscathed. And seeing his towering monstrous form, JINWOO summons his dagger, preparing to fight, and with lightning fast speed he passes by Rockin as a streak of light. And as he reappears behind him, Rockin had still not noticed what had happened as blood started to fall from his body, and he was missing one limb. And as he noticed what had happened, JINWOO tells him 4 more left back in Korea. Baru was healing all the injured hunters, and looking at him, Silid thinks, I don't know about that ant who is healing humans, but this one's certainly an issue. He sees Igris coming straight towards him, and he thinks, I've seen it before, the Knight of Death, one of the 2 wings of T's shadow army. He is Igris, and while running, he thinks now that it's able to use its full power. It's quite bothersome. They can regenerate as long as the Shadow Monarch still has mana, but I can't recover the mana I used for transformation. As he lands, he tells Igris, don't even think about doing something so meaningless. You think you can hold out much longer against me. And Igris stops, burying his sword into the ground, and from his cloak JINWOO started to appear. As he emerges, he throws 2 teeth on the ground, and he tells Silid the Beast Monarch is dead. Hearing that, Silid thinks he killed the Beast Monarch in the few minutes that he was gone. JINWOO tells him the Plague Monarch, the Beast Monarch, and the Frost Monarch. The deaths of these 3 will serve as a warning to the other monarchs. Hearing that, Silid prepares to fight, summoning his ice projectiles, but before he could attack, a dagger stabs him in his heart, and another pierces his shoulder. Desperate, he tries to attack JINWOO with what little mana he has left, but JINWOO grabs him by his mouth and slashes him, saying the Beast Monarch died on the 4th strike. I wonder how much longer you can survive. And Silid lets out a loud scream and turns back to his human form and starts to break down into pieces and disappears in the air. After taking out all the monarchs, JINWOO asks Baru, where is the person who was protecting me earlier? Baru tells him he disappeared all of a sudden, and we see the man sitting as he managed to drag himself away from the battle. He sees his hand breaking down into pieces and thinks, I guess this is the consequence of receiving this power with a mere human's body. And accepting his fate, says it's fine, this is how it should be. And a dagger falls near him, and the man asks, did you really think I wouldn't know if you left like that? It was JINWOO who was asking, why did you leave without a word again? Calling him his father, the story shifts back to a dungeon where JINWOO's father was trapped. He tells JINWOO what happened on that day. After clearing the dungeon boss of the gate, you must escape the gate within an hour. However, I had no choice but to be trapped within the dimensional rift. And the rulers lent me their strength and requested for me to stop the monarchs, including the Shadow Monarch who was soon to be born. And after losing all means of escape, I had no choice to accept their offer, and I returned back to Earth as the ruler's emissary with a heavy responsibility. However, I was not able to fulfill that responsibility, although I knew that the worst calamity of humanity resided inside that body. I couldn't do anything other than observe from a distance. Meanwhile, the rulers whose sole focus was to stop the complete advent of the Shadow Monarch started to change their stance, and finally, the brightest fragment of light issued me a new order to protect the Shadow Monarch, as they had realized that in order to stop the Monarch's plan, they needed the power of the Shadow Monarch, as only his army was able to stop the King of Dragons, who was going to arrive before the soldiers of Brilliant Light, along with his armies. It was a huge gamble, not knowing whether he would side with the humans or the monsters, but now we know the results, and that is why I helped you. I didn't want to show you this side of me. Tears started to fall from JINWOO's eyes after hearing that, and his father asked, "Did you hate me?" JINWOO tells him sometimes, and he apologized. JINWOO explains, "When I first started out as a hunter, when I was at death's door and barely survived to see Mom and Jaina again, you appeared in my mind, and I always hated you whenever it happened, but I also missed you." And asked, "Did you miss my?" He pauses and asks, "Did you miss us?" His father wasn't able to control his emotions, and he tells him, "I missed you all the time. Even though you could not see me, I was happy about the fact that I was able to see you from afar." He gets up, hugging JINWOO, saying, "You've grown well." JINWOO asks Hymus that the rulers are the ones who controlled you and are now throwing you away. His father tells him, "They simply gave me an opportunity to make a choice. I chose to protect you, and I don't regret a single thing about it. But now I want to talk to you more. I want to stay with you longer. I'm sorry that I couldn't be a great father to you." And after saying that, he disappeared in air, and JINWOO was left standing there alone, and he lets out a scream.
And the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.